Hi everyone, it's Joe here from Lawn Solutions Australia, and welcome to this episode of Turf Talk, where today me and Nathan are going to go over some summer lawn care stuff.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Really important time of year to be really focusing on certain areas for your lawn to make sure that it gets through this period as best it can. So let's jump right in.
We're going to start with the forecast, and a forecasted El Niño is here or on its way. Now, I've done my research. I've done my research, and I am the furthest thing from a climate scientist or a meteorologist, but I think I've got it right. So, normal weather patterns, trade winds pushed warm water west along the equator from the Americas towards Asia in the Pacific Ocean. And what happens when that warm water gets pushed west is cold water rises from the surface. This is a process called upwelling. What El Niño and La Niña do is they change this. So El Niño pushes the warm water back east, back towards the Americas from Asia, and this changes the weather patterns. And that's what causes an El Niño. Now, El Niño is Spanish for little boy, and La Niña is Spanish for little girl. And I'm not actually reading this. This is research, hardened research.
I'm impressed, Joe.
Thank you. And it was a term first coined by South Americans in the 1600s, trying to explain unusually warm water temperatures, because obviously it drives the water temperature up too. But anyway, that's enough out of that. So what this means for us is it's going to be hot and dry, essentially for the next little period. They normally last 9 to 12 months, I believe, from my research, and they come around every 2 to 7 years.
They can do, if not longer. Yeah. So Joe's obviously done a bit of research recently, but he does understand this sort of information because it's extremely pertinent or important for turf production or turf suppliers and the national network of turf farms that we have. But also from a lawn standpoint, obviously, as well, you want to make sure that we're understanding what we're in for and how to deal with the oncoming El Niño.
It's El Niño or warm, dry conditions in general have actually done a lot for the turf industry. They've forced a lot of change, and I think it's a lot of change for the better over the years. I know if you're a Victorian listening to this, you'll remember the Millennium Drought, which happened in the early to mid 2000s. And what the Millennium Drought did is it actually pretty well pushed cool season grasses out of the Victorian market. And we did a podcast with Bruce Stevens from Anco Turf, who's been in the industry for 50 years. And he marks that as one of the most pivotal points of his turf career when this happened, because the Victorian market was like 95% fescue and the other 5% was couch kike and a bit of buffalo back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And what the Millennium Drought did is it cause people to switch to warm season varieties for more water sustainability. So El Niño has a massive effect, not just on our lawns, but on our industry as a whole. And what to expect is basically higher than normal temperatures, less rainfall. Away from turf, that obviously means a higher chance of bushfires, unfortunately, as well, which we've seen all too often over the years in our summers. But there's a couple of things, I suppose, that we can get into to help people mitigate their lawns about the effects of El Niño. So where do we want to start there?
So extended periods where we're not getting rainfall means that our lawns are going to become dry. They're going to become stressed. They're not going to be getting the moisture or the water requirement that they need in order to continue to grow, photosynthesize, do what plants do. So during this time, it's important that we understand what we can do as homeowners or in commercial settings to make sure that our grass is able to stand up as best it can, but also not wasting water, being diligent with water, because water usage during that time is obviously as important as ever. There's not a lot of it available. Rainfall's low, dam levels are low as well. So one of the biggest things you can do to make sure, first and foremost, is correct usage of the water that you're applying. And that's not just for an established lawn, that's for a new lawn as well. Irrigation techniques are so important. You can make your watering go further. You can make your lawn more hydrated if you do so correctly. And I think the first point in regards to that is making sure that instead of doing frequent shallow waterings or short waterings that don't last a great amount of time, is making sure you water less frequently but for a longer period, a lot deeper watering but less frequently. And I think that's one of the biggest and most important messages that we bang on a lot about with lawns, is that, you don't have to water your lawn all the time.
No, spot on. And correct irrigation techniques are so important. And what less frequent, deeper watering actually does is it pushes that water further into the soil profile, and your turf roots actually chase the water. So by watering for longer, that water's getting deeper down into the table, and you're pushing your roots to go down further. And what a deeper root system means is they can access water deeper into the ground than what they normally would. So by irrigating, as Nathan said, less frequently and deeper, you're drought-proofing your lawn, essentially. And when we say less frequently and deeper, look, every situation is different. Everyone's soil profile is different. Everyone's turf variety is different. If you can get the sprinkler on in these hot conditions for a good 30 minutes for an irrigation cycle and really push that water into it, even if that's once every couple of weeks, whatever you can do, like we're not in restrictions yet, but if we get to that point, you've obviously got to be mindful of what you can actually do and what water you have and your budget and that sort of thing. But just keep that in the back of your mind as a rule for how much, for what you should be doing for correct irrigation techniques. And we'll get into some other things later, but just staying on irrigation now, you did mention it before about new lawns. So it's the opposite school of thought, essentially, because the reason you do less frequent, deeper irrigations with an established lawn is because you've got a root system there and you want that root system to go down more. With new turf, you don't have a root system. You've got just what's come in the turf. So deep irrigation on a new lawn basically has no effect because there's no roots
to water
deep down.
It's makes it harder.
Water. Exactly. So with new lawns, it's really important to up the frequency. You can't let a new lawn dry out. And I think there's a couple of good techniques out there to help people understand how much to actually water a new lawn, because it's totally dependent on what the weather's like at the time. If you're laying it, I know, like for example, in Adelaide, I know Perth, like this week's like mid to high 30s. If you're laying a new lawn, you'll pretty much have to have the sprinkler on it all day in a roundabout sort of way, where if you're laying it, in a situation where it's overcast and 22, you might only have to water it once or twice. So what we've done is we've tried to take the hard work and the guessing out of that for you. And I know if you're watching now, this will be clear. If you're not watching, this will make absolutely no sense at all. But I'm holding up our best practice irrigation guide, which the team has put together. It's available on our website.
It is on our website, yes. Jump on there.
We'll make sure
we put a link on there, for sure. And it goes into new lawns and established lawns. And one of the key things with new lawns, and you sort of just touched on it, I think they refer to it as syringe watering. It's not where you water it once for half an hour each day. It's where you give it, 3 or 4 15-minute waterings throughout the day for the first, 2 to 3 weeks to really make sure that the roots are able to go into the ground. It sounds like a lot of water. It ends up, if not less. And what it's doing is it's investing in the future of your lawn. If you're able to get its roots to go down, nurture it so that it doesn't go backwards in health-wise while it's trying to establish, you'll get those roots going down quicker. You'll make sure it's staying healthy and it's going to develop longer roots. And then, after the first 12-month period of making sure you follow those proper establishment irrigation techniques, you're creating a lawn that's just going to be so much less thirsty than your neighbours or whoever else who hasn't properly irrigated their new lawn.
And this is so important. If we deal with lawn care problems all the time, if people have an issue with their lawn, generally they contact us or they contact their local member where they bought it from, and I reckon 9 out of the 10 issues related around lawns that are sort of 8 weeks old and younger is purely irrigation, and normally not enough. So we're trying to, and the other issue with that is with a young lawn and no root system in, if you don't irrigate enough and you suffer some dieback, it's very, very hard to get that lawn to recover because there's nothing for it to recover from. There's no root system. So what we've done with this guide is we've broken it down and made it temperature and organised it by temperature. So, for example, our guide says if it's up to 25 degrees, you irrigate this much. If it's 25 to 30, this much. If it's 30 degrees and windy, irrigate this much. So we've broken it down as clear as we possibly can. But there are a few layman's things for you to follow if you do have a new lawn. I know one trick that we have is when you water your lawn, get a tea towel, dunk it in a bucket of water, hang it on the fence, hang it on the clothesline. As soon as that tea towel is dry, your lawn's ready for another water. So if it's 35 degrees and windy, that could be in half an hour. If it's 23 degrees and overcast, it might be for 4 hours. So it's a really good tool to follow if you're at home. But I know not everyone's at home all day, every day.
If that sounds like it's an impossible thing to make sure you're jumping onto the water, that's why it's so important to maybe invest a little bit of money in a sprinkler and a timer if you can, because I think if you're not able to water it as much as it needs it in those first couple of weeks, like we said, it's going to go backwards and then you're going to have to use more water to recover it.
Yeah.
So if you can get it, and we see people all the time, they send us photos and there's usually a hose in the photo, and you know
you're lying.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great sign that you haven't watered it appropriately. You've finally gone out to water it and you've jumped on the hose and you've taken a photo at the same time, and because you're worried about it. And it's just a telltale sign that you've probably not been watering enough, or you've been hosing and you haven't actually put out a sprinkler that's providing even coverage.
Yeah, and sprinklers and tap timers are, they're pretty cost effective to get. Irrigation systems, full-on irrigation systems are unreal, but obviously there's a bit of work involved and a bit of cost involved. But sprinkler and a tap timers are really easy to get your hands on, and they work really, really well. One thing I will say for a new lawn is try not to use a soaker hose. I know they're great for certain like long and skinny areas, but the water volume output on them isn't great. And because the mist is so fine, if there's a little bit of wind around, the droplet size is so small, you can lose a lot to wind drift. So if you can get yourself a sprinkler that, puts out a heavier drop, I think that can be something worth considering.
Yeah, wobble tees. I'm a big fan of the wobble tees. They're a great product. You can connect multiple wobble tees together. They're one of the best, I think, irrigation techniques for a new lawn if you don't have pop-up sprinklers installed. The droplet side's perfect. They distribute really evenly, and they just make your job a lot easier with a new lawn.
The only thing is, don't let your dog anywhere near them. They're a great dog toy the way they're shaped. So
they
just
do.
keep
nice
it out
bright
of,
colours
keep it out
too.
of reach for your Labrador, and you'll be fine. But I think that covers both sides of the fence pretty well there. New lawns, so we want to keep it frequent. There's not as much water you got to put on in an irrigation cycle, but keep it more frequent. And existing lawns, less frequent and deeper. But what page on our website would they find this?
If you just look for irrigation techniques, watering a new lawn, this document will be there and available for you to take a look at. It's quite easy to find there. I guess the other thing as well is being like we can be as concise about exactly temperatures and how much water and those sort of things as much as possible, but it's also about being reactive to the conditions you're experiencing and looking out for the telltale signs of heat stress. So if the leaf is slightly curled, you've got a little bit of wilting or discoloration. It's those are the sort of things you need to be looking out for to understand, okay, my lawn's telling me it's thirsty. That's for an established lawn or a newly installed lawn.
Yeah.
And you might be trying to follow a specific irrigation plan, but the weather and the climate and conditions and all those sort of things, there's so many variables that sometimes it's just a matter of having your finger on the pulse, keeping an eye on it and looking out for those telltale signs and reacting accordingly.
Yep. Great points. And just if you've got a new lawn and you're seeing the edges of the slabs or the rolls dry out and the middle of the slab's still nice and green, don't panic. That's a pretty natural thing for turf when it's establishing down. But if the middle of the slab or roll's drying out, or it's drying out, or it appears to be drying out and losing colour consistently across the piece of turf, then you've probably got a problem and you've got to up your irrigation pretty quick.
Yeah, that's right. And if you can lightly chop dress the joins, it's not a must, but it does certainly help, one, with helping those edges that are a bit more vulnerable, but also with your levels as well. If you're looking to have your lawn really quite low and extremely level moving forwards, It's a great idea from the get-go to help with your levels and work from there. And
just another sign of heat stress, obviously discoloration and the leaf curling, like Nath said before, are some telltale signs. If you see a little bit of, I'd almost call it a grey sort of colour appearing, that can be a little bit of dry patch starting to form too. And generally that's related to hydrophobic soils or compacted soils as well, not just necessarily dry conditions, but it can, a combination of the two. So if you see random, they appear sort of like a grey sort of patch on your lawn, that generally means, hey, maybe it's time to get a garden fork and poke a couple of holes in it, get a soil wetter on there.
We've already started getting quite a few photos sent through that look synonymous with that. It's like almost a blue tinge to it. Some people sort of sometimes confuse it with grubs. They think their first guess, I don't know why, is that they've got a lawn grub infestation. But if you ask questions about how long, over what time period it's occurred and what the climate conditions have been and has there been any rainfall, 9 times out of 10 you go, okay, you haven't watered it enough, or your ground preparation wasn't right, or what is your soil like, and have you undertaken aeration? Is it compacted? All those sort of things, we can pretty quickly diagnose it. So if you do experience those sort of conditions and you're not sure how to identify it, send us through some photos, email, website, app on the Lawn Solutions Australia app, or on our Facebook as well. We're answering those questions all the time. We're always here to help.
And when we see a lot of it historically is obviously over the summer break, over the summer holidays, because what happens if people lay their lawn in September, October, November, it's established, they've mowed it a couple of times, they shoot down the coast for 2 weeks over Christmas, it's 35 degrees and sunny every single day, they come back and they go, oh, it's gone. So if you are going to go on a holiday and you're going on a holiday over summer, talk to your neighbour, talk to someone down the road, set up a sprinkler system, whatever you got to do, just make sure you don't totally neglect it, because 10 days with no water and supreme heat with reflective from fences and houses and that sort of thing, we just see this so often is we get a photo, hey, look at my lawn, what's wrong with it? Oh, what have you been doing? I don't know, I've been down the coast for 2 weeks, I'm not sure. Well, we kind of know what it is straight away. So just make sure you put some things in place where it's going to get some irrigation while you're away.
Yeah, tap timers. And look at that extended forecast for while you're away. Obviously, you're going away to hopefully enjoy some hot summer days and use the beach and those sort of things. So if that's the case and that's what you're looking forward to because you've looked at the forecast, keep your lawn in mind as well and look at maybe putting a timer on.
Don't forget the grass.
That's it.
So we just spoke about the signs of stress, I guess. The next point we want to talk about is ways to mitigate this stress and to help drought-proof your lawn. So wetting agents and soil
wetters. So we've covered off all the key things you can do with how to make sure you're using water effectively for new and established lawns. But there is another way that you can go about making sure you're sort of drought-proofing your lawn and helping your lawn absorb the water that is available, and that's through soil wetters or wetting agents.
So basically you get more bang for your buck out of your water, don't you? So there's wetting agents which actually help water penetrate the soil, and then wetting agents which actually help your soil absorb water more efficiently. It's all about the molecule size and that sort of thing. So they work by altering the surface tension of water, allowing it to spread more evenly throughout the soil rather than beating up or forming puddles. So basically it helps water push down into your soil profile. And if you're irrigating your lawn and you notice water pooling or sitting on top, chances are your profile's got some hydrophobia or is hydrophobic. So the only way to really fix that is with a wetting agent. And people often think, I don't know why with wetting agents, they think there's some sort of myth around them or behind them, but they work so well. And there's so many videos out there now with visual evidence of how effective wetting agents can actually be. So they should form part of your lawn program anyway, but I think they're pretty important over the next few months.
Absolutely. They're a product that I think should be included in any lawn care program at any time, whether we're experiencing dry periods or not, because when the water is available, it's going to go to where it's needed, and your lawn's going to hold up and make use of that moisture so much better than it would without it. But obviously during drought and conditions of low rainfall, it's more important than ever, and I think it's a must. I think it makes a massive difference. You can use the same water on two different lawns, but if one's hydrophobic and not absorbing water well, and the other one is because you've applied a soil wetter, it's just your lawn's just going to hold up so much better. And the end result is, you're going to use less water in order to keep it looking reasonable. Obviously during drought, and I'll probably led on to something else. During El Niño, your lawn's potentially not going to look as good as it can look or would look at other times of year, or in other years where the conditions are more pertinent or better for maintaining a green lawn. There's a few words we're trying to avoid when it comes to making sure your lawn stays hydrated. A few trigger words that we don't like to use. We get a few giggles out of Mick, who films our podcast, as well as Joe himself, 12-year-old boys.
Grow up.
Where was I? I don't even know.
Soil wetters. So Lawn Soaker is our one, and we sell it in a ready-to-use form. So you're just going to hook your hose up and spray it straight onto your lawn. But look, you can use them any time of the year, really, but they're just so important at the moment. And whilst there is a cost associated with applying a wetting agent, you get that cost back with water saving straight away and actually having some effect on your lawn, which is really, really good. And anything you do here when it comes to drought-proofing your lawn, it's just a way up for your particular situation, like how much water you actually have access to, how much water you want to spend, what the conditions or restrictions are like in your particular area. So don't take any rule as gospel. Just sort of follow what's best for your area. And if it's within your budget and it's within the rules, always try and put a wetter on and still continue to irrigate your lawn.
That reminds me of what I was going to go on to before was basically, it's not about making your lawn look awesome during drought conditions. It's about maintaining it and getting it to survive and get through it. The more drought tolerant the turf variety you have is, like a Tiff Tuff, for example, the more you follow these practices and use soil wetters, the better it's going to hold up for sure, and you'll have it looking reasonable. But I don't think the end game should be having a beautiful, perfect looking lawn during those time periods. It's not sustainable. It's not what we're looking for. What we're looking to do is just nurture our lawns through that period to make sure that they're going to survive and see us through on the other side.
It's probably not the best look in the middle of level 2 water restrictions if everyone's lawn's dead and yours is bright, vibrant green. You might get a few looks.
Right.
But in saying that, there are ways to achieve a greener lawn than other people without breaking the rules. Soil wetters is one of them, and I think we might go into a couple other ways.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about Colour Guard Plus as a pigment in this, but I think we saw was it 2019 when we saw drought conditions a few years ago that we sold a hell of a lot of Colour Guard Plus because basically it greened up your lawn instantly without having to flood a heap of water in it that you didn't have because of water restrictions. So people were able to have a decent looking green lawn through the use of a pigment. In the US, that's predominantly why they use pigments. They use them in the summer where the grass has gone somewhat dormant due to the hot, dry conditions, and they want their lawns to be green. Over here, we tend to think of pigments as a winter thing to try and help the lawns stay green when they usually go brown or lose a bit of colour in winter. But they can be a great option during drought conditions through summer. They're just basically going to make you from an appearance perspective.
I think it's an underrated thing. I know, like you just touched on, and people often get a shock of this, is they don't use pigments virtually at all for winter colour improvement in the southern parts of the US on warm season turf grass. Pigments are used almost exclusively, but like we get areas like Texas, and Texas is historically very, very hot and very, very dry. So warm season grasses can struggle, and whilst they might have limited water, they can put a pigment on it and it looks great. And California is another big area over there. We see fires in California every summer. It gets so hot and so dry, and 90% of their pigment over there is sold during the summer months. So I think it's something the Australian turf market could probably look at doing a little bit more. There's a bunch of pigments on the market, whether it's Colour Guard Plus or not. I think it's a great way to achieve a green lawn without upsetting the environmental rules.
And I think in the US, their extremes in winter are just so much more like lower sub-zero temperatures than what we experience here, that even pigments are struggling to colour up a lawn. They're just so brown.
We're in Georgia in February this year. In the week 2 weeks before we were there, it was minus 14 C where we were. So there's not a lot your pigment's going to do when it gets like that. But a couple of other things people should consider. So there's obviously wetting agents, there's irrigation practices like we spoke about, and also colorants, which again I think are a pretty underrated thing if you're looking for drought tolerance. Mowing settings. What are you thinking here?
Well, there's a couple of rules of thought on it. If you're getting good rainfall, you can basically keep your mowing height as you normally would. If there's not in summer and we're going to experience hot and dry conditions, you want to try and enable the grass to retain as much moisture as it can. So mowing a little bit higher and leaving a little bit more leaf is going to help your lawn stay more hydrated and not become drought stressed as quickly. So I think it's an important time to raise the mower and not a lot of us are trying at certain times of the year and now in particular, maybe to get their lawn at absolute best they possibly can. That might mean for you as low as you possibly can, depending on what variety you have. But you've just got to understand that the lower you go, the more inputs that are required, the more water. So if you're not looking necessarily during this time to keep it as low as possible and you don't have water available, water restrictions, not a lot of rainfall, then you want to be raising the mowing height a notch or two to make sure it's going to hold up a bit better.
If you are dead set on keeping your lawn at a really, really short height, let's say sub 12 mil, which people do, and you are going to be in an area that's going to struggle from drought, I'd look at a PGR as well, a plant growth regulator. They can actually do a lot for drought-proofing your lawn because it essentially doesn't shut down, but it greatly slows down the vertical growth of the lawn, which greatly reduces the need for inputs as well. So if you're dead keen on keeping it short and you're a little bit worried about irrigation, I'd look at a PGR like Primo Max to help.
And PGRs are a great option to look at just in summer in general, outside of drought conditions or El Niño. If you're looking to really slow down the growth, once you've got it healthy and looking respectable. PGRs are such a phenomenal product for being able to thicken up a lawn, reduce the amount of mowing you need to do. So you're putting less work into it and you're getting a better result out of it. It's sort of a dream product, and I think it's going to be used so much more commonly in the coming years. And it's sort of, there's a wave of people using it at the moment, but I think it's just going to become so much more common.
I spoke about Colour Guard being an underutilised product in summer. I think PGRs are underutilised in general. I know it's funny saying underutilised. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have sold a bottle of Primo Max residentially anywhere in Australia. But the way the market's going now is people are using them, and rightly so. But if you are going to consider a PGR or a plant growth regulator, is you just want to make sure you have your sprayer calibrated. It's really important. You need to know how much water you use over a certain amount of meterage. We've got an awesome video blog done on this if you want to work out how to easily calibrate your sprayer. But if you are going to put a PGR out, just make sure you do it right, because if you get it wrong, you can really slow the growth down.
Absolutely.
It doesn't grow for a while.
You can cause some issues. So with any product like that, it's a little bit more of a professional grade product. Calibrate, like Joe said, so making sure you know how much water you apply with your sprayer to know how much PGR to mix with that water. Like Joe said, there's a little bit to making sure you do that right. But then also, if you've never used it before, read the label instructions, read the safety data sheet, make sure you're doing all those things first, and then use the lower dosage rate, if not slightly below the low-end application rate, to make sure that you're just testing it out, you're applying it evenly, and you don't run into any issues for the first time. And sometimes a lawn that hasn't been sprayed with PGR before, it can yellow a little bit. It's quite common for that to occur, and more so in some varieties than others. So, and that can obviously stress you out. You stress the lawn out, made a bit yellow, and you're sort of back to square one. So
they actually recommend that, even if you have applied it before, they recommend basically weaning your lawn onto PGR.
Onto it, yeah.
Don't go straight in hot at 30 mil per 100 or whatever the high rate is. Start even at half the recommended rate, and then in a couple of weeks' time, reapply it. If you do want to know how or when, say if you are using a PGR, if you want to know when to reapply, Syngenta, the company that make Primo Max, they have a calculator, a growing degrees days calculator on their website. So the reapplication of PGRs is all down to a formulation about growing degree days, how many growing degree days, is between applications. And you do that by basically plugging in the max and the minimum temperature for that particular day, and it will spit out how many days' time you need to reapply relevant to the weather. So reapplication of PGRs is all relevant to the weather in your particular location. So it's not reapply every 6 weeks as a blanket rule. You've actually got to, work out how many growing degree days it will be. But the Syngenta website's got a really good tool for that. So be worth looking at that.
It's good to do that. Obviously, the growth of the grass, it's going to start growing again as it starts wearing off as well. So you'll have a bit of an idea. But if you want to be really precise about how you're going about it to ensure that you're not over applying PGRs, that's a good calculator to use for reapplication.
Another one, I guess, is soil aeration. This is like if you read any I don't know if there is a farming handbook, but any farming book generally, soil aeration or decompacting soil or cultivating soil is the first thing they tell you to do. And I think it's something that's really important in lawn care. I think a lot of people may have done this recently when they've renovated their lawn. They've probably aerated or they've cored. But if you are suffering from some drought stress, I think aeration should be used in conjunction with perhaps a wetting agent or something like that, just to help get into the soil. But like if you see your lawn struggling and it's in certain patches, an easy thing to do is just get a screwdriver or something and poke it into the ground. If you've really got to push hard and basically force that into the ground, then you're probably going to need to aerate or relieve some compaction for that area. It's going to make your lawn so much more drought tolerant. Basically, it allows air, water, and nutrients to get deeper into the profile. So it's something worth considering if you haven't done it already. If you're going to do it and your lawn's really hard, I'd suggest putting the sprinkler on the lawn first to soften up the profile a little bit and then aerate it. But like I see a lot of instances now of people aerating manually, and
it's hard work.
It's hard work. Whilst it can be done, if you've got a small area, their hand corers are great. Garden forks are great. But if you've got a large area, save your back and go to your local hire shop and get a petrol corer or a petrol aerator. We do it here every year, and they're like, again, I don't like talking price because I know everyone's different, but they're $110 for half a day hire or something like that. Find a friend, find a neighbour who wants to do it too, and split it with them if you've got to do it that way. But it'll save you.
Yeah. In particular, during this time, you end up with hot, dry soil that becomes baked under the sun. It makes it really hard, and then your lawn gets sparse because the runners aren't able to grow or survive properly. So wetting agents and aerations are the two key ways to make sure that then obviously you're trying to get water accessible down to the roots through that process. But if you can water your lawn as much as you want, it's just wasted if it can't get down into the soil because the ground's too baked hard and compacted. So give it an aerate, apply a wetting agent, water it all in, and you'll find that your lawn's going to grow back in, it's going to thicken right up, and that you've alleviated that problem that's meant that your lawn's become really thirsty and started to struggle.
Absolutely. I guess everything we spoke about there is if you have an existing lawn, about what you can do to drought proof it. But if you're going to put a new lawn down, there's some considerations as well. But like these aren't considerations just because of drought conditions. You should be doing what we're about to speak about anyway. But I think it's just a good thing, not a good thing, but with the conditions out of forecast, it's a timely reminder to do this sort of stuff. So if you are putting a lawn down, getting your soil profile right is so important. We always say here, turf's just the pretty stuff on top and it gets the blame for all the problems, but usually problems are centralised around the soil profile. So basically, the deeper and richer your soil profile is, the less maintenance you're going to have to do to your lawn. Like you can lay turf on the Princess Highway and keep it alive. You just have to water it for 10 hours a day and fertilise it every week. But basically the point I'm illustrating there is that the better your profile, the less work. The worse your profile, the more work you got to do, and that is so evident in drought. So if you're in the market now or you're prepping your own yard for lawn, just make sure at least 150 to 200 mil of a good quality underlay, which has a mix of sand and also some organics in there as well. So we always recommend a ratio of sort of a 70-30, 80-20, the larger part being a sand and the smaller part being some rich organics to try and hold some of that moisture and also give your lawn some nutrients. So I just think that's something worth considering, and it's really, really important. If you've got a sand base already, try and incorporate some manure or some organics into that sand base to really pump that up. Basically, what sand does is it helps grass roots go down a nice soft profile, and it helps water drain. I know we've spoke about holding moisture recently, but it's also important to let the bulk of the water actually get away. Turf hates wet feet. And what the organic component does is it gives the roots a little bit of nutrient and also has some moisture holding capabilities. And sound about right?
Before you lay turf is the prime time to do it. If you're never going to get potentially that opportunity to get your base right again. So yeah, spend a little bit more on the soil that you need, the sand that you need to make sure that you're putting down that base for your turf so that it's going to survive and thrive. But yeah, it's so much harder to amend a lawn if the ground preparation wasn't done right and the turf's already down. You're either going to make a big mess trying to rip up the turf and put it back down and sort out the soil. So yeah, the time to rectify and sort out your soil is before the turf goes down, 100%.
And cultivar selection obviously comes in next, and we sell turf grass, so we're going to talk about our varieties in particular, but it's important to consider your access to water or the ability you have to irrigate when you're selecting a turf variety, particularly in the installation phase. If you don't have access to water or you're not sure you're going to be around all the time to irrigate, you'll probably have to look at a drought-tolerant variety like Tif Tuff to fill that void. It really uses less water, not just in the once it's established, but also when you're establishing Tif Tuff, the water requirements are so much less. So that's a consideration point for sure.
And you talked about the millennium drought before, and in particular in Victoria, how basically that lawn owners and turf farms, they had to change from cool season to warm season grasses. They were forced to because they just died and they needed replacing, and they couldn't replace them with fescue or ryegrass because if they did that again, they're just in a perpetual cycle of just having it planted, die. So they had to look to warm season grasses because they're more drought tolerant. And within warm season grasses, there's more drought tolerant species and cultivars than others. So really important because, there's a big investment in a new lawn and you want to make sure it's going to survive and be able to last the conditions.
And if you're not sure what is the right fit for you, you can jump on our website. We've got a bunch of little tools there that you can plug in what's important to you, and it'll spit out the variety that's best suited to you, or just give your local Lawn Solutions member a call. They've got great localised advice, and they'll steer you through the journey to make sure you get the right variety, whether it's drought tolerance is your hero trait, whether it's wear tolerance, whether it's shade tolerance, whether it's less mowing. Doesn't matter what it is. Your local Lawn Solution member's got a variety to suit your needs, which is pretty cool.
We talk about TIFF all the time, and particularly at the moment, it's got the Smart Approved watermark, and it was awarded that for pretty good reasons. It's got a lot of investment in trials and data in order to basically for it to be selected because of its drought tolerance. That was the number one priority for that grass, is that it would be a drought tolerant cultivar, and it outperformed everything else. So if you're looking for something that's basically top of the pile as far as drought tolerance, the Smart Approved watermark confirms it. TIFF is that option as far as grasses go.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a lot of advice for people to absorb, but I think it's pretty important advice. If you ever want to expand on anything we just spoke about, like I said, you can just punch it into your Google or your search engine and it'll come up. But on our website, we've got so many good articles, blogs, videos, case studies on everything we spoke about today and how people can implement that into their lawn care program. And while we've got it in front of us,
Turf Talk.
Latest edition of Turf Talk's out. It's free for people to subscribe to and get it sent to them. And it's got a bunch of articles on all things happening in the turf industry.
Yep, Turf Talk December edition out now. You can get it a hard copy, or you can just get a digital copy online through the LSA website here. Great little plug for the Turf Talk podcast on the inside cover. If you're watching the video, you'll see Joe holding it up there. You can check out other episodes via the QR code that's on that ad there, but some great stories in Turf Talk magazine if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what goes on in the commercial side of turf, domestic side of turf, just all aspects of turf. Turf Talk magazine has it covered.
Awesome. All right. Good to chat.
Thanks, Joe.
Too easy. Thanks, Nath.
Thanks, guys.